And as I share the information I have to share, I I don't want to assume to know anything, but I want to share, I guess, conceptually a lot of the stuff that I've kind of been learning, and I'd love, to get a lot of people's feedback, if you guys are open to talk. A friend of mine is Safu Bernard. I'm sure many of you are probably familiar with him, but he says that decision is more important and precedes technique, and skill, in his opinion, is choosing the right technique or solution to meet the situation. And in order to do that, one must perceive, decide, um, and that's really struck a big chord with me as far as from the skill development piece, because that's basically what I've been doing for the last 10 years, working with NBA college, high school players, and so forth over the years. And what I found more and more is it's just about solving solutions. And if my skill meets the problem, then I can solve the solution. So skill development in general, there are only three things that you can train. You can train your craft, you can train your body, and you can train your mind. And those are basically the only three things that you can train. And so when we talk about skill acquisition, it's in the cognitive stage, the associative stage, and the autonomous stage. And I think with every coach that works with players at any level, we're basically trying to do as much as we can in that associative stage for the most part, especially if you're dealing with athletes that are anywhere with that high school to professional range on up. Um, and then if we're fortunate enough, we can get many of them to the autonomous stage where they can operate very freely and basically do the things that we want them to do. The magic is what I like to call it. Um, this, from my opinion, the skill development coach's job is to help every athlete get as close as they can to becoming their best self or achieve their highest level of flow. So some people call it flow state, and if you can get a team to do this, is what you call group flow. If you saw the San Antonio Spurs years ago, they called that summertime basketball, when the ball was just moving around and you had a team that was operating in unison like that. That's the highest level in my mind of what this is. And so the autonomous stage is what that is. So the next thing is we're going to talk about just in general is just the general skills of a basketball player. So obviously everybody wants to be able to pass, shoot, and dribble. But I think probably the biggest thing, and this I think goes back to a lot of the discussion, all of the buzzwords now around small-sided games, all goes to processing and decision making. And I don't know if a lot of you are familiar with the book by David Epstein, Range. Um, Pretty much everything from Epstein, personally, I'm obsessed with. But all of the information that he talks about is highly in tune and keen with basically processing and decision making. And he has a documentary that he did called "In Search of Greatness" that I would strongly encourage everybody to watch if you haven't already. And he talks quite a bit about that and gives many examples of this. So after processing decision making, defense and defensive versatility, which I think is probably the biggest thing. Like most of the pre-draft stuff now, if you guys know about the stuff that's being done, everything is about switching. Can you switch and contain one-on-one? There is no more, if players obviously involved in the pre-draft process where they would go and you're focusing on different types of coverage defensively. They want to know, if there is a switch, can you contain your man one-on-one? And then for me, this is probably I think the thing that we don't talk about a lot. And Francesco, you talked about this when you were talking about playing cards with your grandmother. It's the competitive will, which is the secret. And it's the ultimate assessment of, are you a winner? Do you impact winning? And do you, as a coaches, are we creating a culture where we are competing and we're impacting winning? Steve Kerr consistently talks about the four tenets by which the Golden State Warriors operate on: compassion. What is it? Compassion? I'm about to say compassion and empathy together. I'm drawing a blank, but he has four main ones, but one of them is competitiveness. And everything that he did, that he learned from with Pete Carroll, with the time that they spent, is devised around creating those competitive structures on a daily basis and with everything that they do. And so I think that's just something that every coach should consider and think about. So what I want to talk about next was just phases of development. How I've kind of been introduced to this as far as phase A, phase B, and phase C. We often talk about 1-on-0, which, it is what it is as far as, I'm sure we all know the Instagram trainers and the people that market that. Phase B, which is guided or scripted defense. For me personally, this is action-based skill development. And then phase C, which is the small-sided games, the mini competitions, live play, and what we usually see from I think this is the most value for youth players, but there's obviously great value for professional and high-level players as well.
So I found, Gilbert,
personally,
I found the four core values: the joy, mindfulness, compassion, and competition.
Yes, thank you. I've been like talking about this all week, and my brain just, I think I've had too much coffee. But thank you.
Yeah. So and if you don't mind, I also have a fellow coach saying he has a phase A plus as well. Paul, if you don't mind, could you give a brief 30-second review on your phase A if you unmute yourself?
Yeah, Mike, it's so phase A to D, but then there's A plus, which is kind of like having your barriers in place, but also you can have your decisions in there as well based on what, if you're in a 2-on-0 with a barrier in place based on the choice that the receiver is doing, then you can obviously have decisions as well without having defenders in place. But A plus is having barriers, like stationary barriers like stick men or stuff like that, so that can be your A plus.
I like that.
Yeah, so
yeah.
All right, thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Yeah, but
please continue.
Oh yeah, well, basically what I was going to say, just in regards to this, I think collectively in basketball right now, we see basically the difference between what we traditionally know as block training, which is like one VO style of training. It's working on moves, for example, versus what we're seeing now, which is the biggest trend which is small-sided games, structured games, and all of that. And from personal experience, I think once you get to higher level players, if we are talking in particular about, for example, if I'm working with one of my clients in the US, and they're having a particular problem at becoming more efficient, for example, in a certain situation in pick and roll or spot up situations, for example, then there may be some value for the block training to help them become more efficient in that situation. If we're working on something very particular, like footwork and some of that stuff. And I think that's where the phase A stuff originated, if we're dialing in on it in terms of for what it's worth or what it actually serves a purpose for. But generally speaking, phase B is usually where I think most people are trying to operate now, or what exists now as far as like from a skill development coach perspective. That's where I can probably offer the most value. Phase C is, again, it's a great value and probably the most valuable thing now. But I think there is value in everything. And, what's the saying? If you're going to if you want to provide value in general, you have to understand, I think, the value of each one of these sources and methods. And we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater is all I'll say. I think everything serves a purpose, maybe some far less than others, because I think nowadays you have players that, in the past, they could play, for example, like they played a lot, right? I'm saying, and this is me talking about US players in particular. They played a lot, but then they would go to a training or a camp setting, and then the purpose of them going there was for them to gain additional skill that would make them better when they played. And now I don't think we have kids that play a ton, especially not under supervision, in terms of go play pickup and these things. And then so when you do get a coach, now we're providing the opportunity to actually play, right? Which which is the reason why small-sided games have become so valuable, and why there's such a large emphasis. And this is just my opinion on it. But I would love to hear the different perspectives on this as well. Okay, so
Yeah, I think best to pick up such a discussion at the end. So
yes,
yeah,
I agree.
before people
This is a hot
unmute-
topic.
yeah, before people unmute themselves and
Yeah.
go like, oh well, I think this.
No, I agree. I agree. This is personally one of my favorite quotes. This is from Albert Einstein, that imagination is more important than knowledge. And what I've personally found, and this is obviously now I've been in Europe for, I spent about 8 to 9 months here in the US. And, there are certain things that I've found that like European players do far superior to American players, but at the same time, American players do far superior to European players. And there's been a very good contrast to go back and forth with working with the different players and seeing the differences. And one of them, I think, is collectively speaking here, like, I think the players are constrained way more in regards to their offensive creativity. The aggression, whereas in the US, everybody's extremely aggressive one-on-one in those situations. And I'm speaking very generally and very stereotypically, so please don't judge me for saying any of this, but these are just my opinions. So basically assessing for translation, these are just questions that I'm constantly asking myself as I'm working with the players that I work with. Does what I'm teaching work? Improvisation, so a lot of times I'm thinking about, where did moves come from? This whole idea about this move and that move and all this stuff, where did it come from? Somebody was playing one-on-one or playing 5-on-5, and they were presented with a problem and they tried something and it worked. Like recently they were talking about, I don't know if you guys are familiar with zooms, what they're calling zooms or gets, where you pass and then chase the ball, right? Bradley Beal was talking about that, and it was like, he just tried it in the game and it's become something. Now it's literally like, if you run any of this, 21 series, 5-out, delay, any of those actions, this is an integral part of it now. And it was something that somebody just tried. So it's just something to think about. And for me personally, what I'm constantly asking myself and trying to do with the players I'm working with is, am I allowing for self and peer review and individual exploration throughout the workouts and throughout the practices, throughout everything? And then actually something I've been challenging the coaches here quite a bit on is, it's not about me dictating to the players everything. It is a collaborative effort. So if I'm a human being and that's another human being, and we're putting our heads together, we can accomplish a lot together, because I see value and intelligence in my players, and I think that they're brilliant people. And if I don't tap into their brilliance, how can we get them to be the best version of themselves if we don't do that? I've had conflict with people, very healthy conflict, in terms of getting them to shift the mindset in that regard. But, I do believe every human being is brilliant. And, if we don't provide the opportunity for self-exploration and growth, then we're not going to see it. So that's my spiel on that. And then so have I facilitated bike riding time? And this is just a question I have, oftentimes, and this is a lot from the stuff I do at the US, but it's like, I think every player should be able to create a shot for themselves whenever they want in any kind of situation. Like, they should have the skill set to do that as an offensive weapon, for example. And, in many cases, many athletes, they don't actually get the opportunity to do that. And then you don't know what they can become. And once somebody actually develops the wheelhouse to be able to do that, it's very interesting what can happen from there. And then obviously, once you can create a shot for yourself, can you create good shots for other people consistently? And I think that's when the magic again happens, as far as being able to play with the ball and create. So so what to look for? Do I see a direct reflection of what I practice in my games? Are your players retaining the information that they're learning? can my players solve problems on their own? This is probably the biggest one for me. And Francesco, you brought up some excellent points about how you start with 5-on-0, or excuse me, 5-on-5, and then go to other games. I do the same stuff, and I like, for me personally, I consider myself to be a mad scientist. I just like to tinker and mess around with this stuff to see what the players can come up with. But you'd be surprised how brilliant they are in terms of what they will come up with when you just throw them into the fire and see what they do. And then you may provide some coaching and structure, but again, it's collaborative. We're all working together. And then this is something I honestly am asking a lot of the coaches that I run across. It's, do I actually want my players to solve the problem on their own? Because some people, I don't think intrinsically or deep. And it's something to think about, in terms of how you develop your practices and your structures.
We lost you
Go ahead,
for a
sorry.
sec. We lost you for a second. So you asked us the question, and we were in a huge delay awaiting your answer, and then your answer was done.
Oh, my bad. Where did I end?
So you asked the question, do I want my players to solve problems on their own? And after that, it was a blank for me.
Okay, yeah. Basically, what I said is that in many cases, you have to ask yourself deeply as a coach, is that what I actually want? Yeah, and in many cases, I've had to challenge a lot of coaches that I've worked with, and I direct also for PGC, so I'm doing that throughout the country. When I'm back in the U.S., and we have a lot of coaches that we talk with and counsel, et cetera. And personally, I don't know how often coaches completely want to relinquish control from that perspective, to allow their players to solve these problems on their own. And I think it's something that it's very important to reflect on, to make sure that we're structuring things in a way that the players can do that.
So to conclude, your opinion on that question is that, am I saying it correctly, that you do want your players to solve problems on their own and you're allowing them to do that, or you're
Yes.
still putting in constraints?
Yes, yeah, I would like them to. I mean, because at the end of the day, like if they can get to the point where they can do that at a high enough level, then the coach can really, really just focus on providing more tactical support, that's more general, or excuse me, very, very highly technical, sorry, to help them, right, to solve problems in the game. And they can do things at a much, much higher level. But if everything that I'm doing is all geared towards how I can manipulate and control things because I wanted them always come to me, I don't think you create a very adaptable player or even a human being, let alone, basketball. I want I want to be somebody that's enabling the people around me to be able to operate autonomously and on their own.
Yeah. So and at what point do you think the cognitive load or that you're going to put them in some sort of overloading cognitive wise? At what point do you think that happens, or what do you do when you hit that spot? Because at that point, the adaptation towards what you're looking for is not coming out.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think, this is something I'm talking with the players often, because I think I have fun doing that quite a bit. But the question I'm always asking is, do you struggle well? And I want every day for there to be struggle. Like, I want to create struggle. I want to create adversity consistently. And if you're constantly struggling, then you're also constantly trying to figure out how to solve these problems. And then that is the same way we go in the weight room and we work on weights. We're working on this muscle that is designed to deal with these types of situations and problems and adversity and figure out a way how to overcome them. So, obviously there are times where I'll back off some and then provide support because it's needed. But more often than not, sometimes I may add more load, just to see how they respond, because, again, the human is resilient. I think humanity is very resilient, and, you'll be surprised what people can come up with if you put them in enough positions of struggle.
Indeed.
Okay. And this last one, this actually was from a very, very good friend of mine. We were speaking recently. This is Coach Cardenas in Spain, and he was asking, "Do I truly know, my players' objectives, and do our goals align?" And, this struck a big chord with me because oftentimes, we obviously as a team or as a coach may have an objective, but if the objective is not the same with the player, then all of these things that we're trying to accomplish, it's like, what are they for? So I just think it's another very important thing to zoom in on. And actually, this is something I'm experimenting with now. I'm going to be really trying to lock in on finding out exactly what the objectives of our players are deeply, so that then I can do what I can do in my way to help support them and help them achieve those ambitions. Okay, so this for me is my personal formula that I've had success with, and I'm not trying to be braggadocious at all with any of this, but with kids in the US for I want to say about 3 years, 3 or 4 years, and every one of these kids ended up leaving the gym. After it was over, all of them ended up playing in the ACC or the Big East, and they're all playing there now. Some of them are actually playing in this NCAA tournament. And I had the fortune of having a gym, strength conditioning, biking, all that type of stuff. And I was able to do this kind of formula on a daily basis. And so it was strength training, conditioning, skill-based training, which I consider to be phase A, which is, it's not just moves, it's obviously shooting, passing, ball handling, etc. And I think the big key with phase A part that I think oftentimes is being overlooked is somebody may be able to do something in a way that produces a result. Let's say if I put them in a situation, they may be able to solve the problem, but it's not in a polished way that will work, say, for example, at a high level. So if I have a youth player or a young player, for example, who is very successful at, let's say, ball handling, and they've never really been taught technically how to do certain things, but I put them in an elite environment and they haven't developed the skills for that elite environment, then that's, I think, where the connection is, and there's certain things that you can do from a shooting, footwork, ball handling perspective that are phase A, want-to-know things that have great value. Then obviously action-based skill development for me, which is, I like to basically in these situations, put every player in every situation. So I'm going to put, large players, in ball handling situations in every kind of pick and roll, angle, spread, middle pick and roll, side pick and roll, logo pick and roll, elbow pick and roll, like all this stuff is a ball handler and a roll man. So that whenever you transplant them and put them in another situation, they're completely prepared. There's nothing new, and that they can also be very adaptable because they've done it. And they can basically spray the ball around, and also play out of these situations. So that's just a small example. And then obviously the small-sided games, which basically, obviously we all have 1,001 different ways that we can do that. Yeah, and that's probably for a whole nother talk, and I could talk. Which is a large part of the peer review. And then this big piece here is for me is just assessing translation, because once we play, and I would always like to end all of our training with some kind of play. For me, and this is, I think, the trained eye part, if you've done this, is, all right, are they utilizing the things that we're working on, and is there value? Like, are they able to translate it? And then repeat, do it again. If something didn't translate, okay, I need to make changes and see if I can have that work. So any questions on that? Does this make sense at all?
Yeah, it looks like it makes a lot of sense in terms of that. And I know we also have some coaches in here that might be training or might be working with younger kids than like high school kids. So
Yes.
more about youth. So I think in terms of strength training and conditioning, that's a little bit like you're not really working on the strength training and conditioning part with for example, 10, 11, 12-year-olds, because to come back to Francesco's words, they have no muscles.
Indeed.
So I think then you might skip that one and go ahead to the other stuff, which is really good even with under 14s. Why should you not be watching film? It's a great way to learn. So no, I did this formula itself. It looks really, really great.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Okay. Yeah, so just another quote I wanted to share with you. So Daniel Coyle, I'm sure you're all familiar with, who wrote The Talent Code. And he's one of my favorite authors. You know, probably him and Epstein are two of my favorites. And so in The Talent Code, he said, deep practice feels a bit like exploring a dark and unfamiliar room. You start slowly, you bump into furniture, stop, think, start again. Slowly and a little painfully, you explore the space over and over, attending to errors, extending your reach into the room a bit farther each time, building a mental map. And that is gold for me personally. I mean, that strikes a deep chord with me, because that's what we should be facilitating and creating in our labs, you know, and in what we're creating as far as any skill development situations. So yes. And then basically again, this is all stuff that we know, but I've been just tinkering a lot with what type of constraints that we can create, you know, as far as in the skill development process. So, Paul, you brought up the barriers at the phase A level, obviously shrinking the space of the court. Personally, my favorite is probably time. That's like my most favorite, I think, is time. Closing shot clocks. Can you do it in limited time, create space and create shots? And a combination of all of those things. So again, this is not new, but probably the biggest thing for me is that, like, you know, I do pre-draft work. Like when I go home, I'll be doing that to prepare guys for the NBA draft. And I don't necessarily always like people coming to watch, because I think the best skill development in actuality is messy. It's not very glamorous. It's not going to be something that can be, if I'm trying to get you better, right? You know, there needs to be a certain level of chaos. And I would be curious, even with a lot of you all, if we're, you know, if you're trying to create a healthy level of chaos, but you're also trying to market yourself, right? And what you're doing, how can you, you know, healthy, you know, in a healthy way, capture that, but still also do a good job. And yeah, I don't know. I'm curious, you know, for some of you all. Obviously, I've seen some of what everyone does, but that's always a conflict for me, because I just want to do good work. You know, personally, that's all I care about.
Yeah, so basically, and that's a little preview to what's to come. Most of the times after sharing, we go off record and we stay around for a while with the guys that want to stay, get to know each other a little bit better if you want to. But I think this also plays into the fact that, and now you've been here in Europe as well, that there's a huge difference in competitiveness in coaches, because in the high school and in the college level in the US, you're like scored on your winning and losing record.
Yeah.
And out here, that's not the case. So out here, we can most of the times look for those messiness, look for those chaos, and look to work with that. Because out here, most of the times, your job is at least secured for the full season, because there are not so much changes going around. And in that terms, that's a lot of stress as a coach that you can use to develop kids in terms of, if I'm doing this, I might lose the next game and I might lose my job.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. Yeah, and honestly, I have seen that. I think from an individual skill perspective, the messy part, I think. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah, it is probably a question for offline, or probably a conversation for offline. But it's, yeah. So I'll skip over this, but this is just futsal in the use of Daniel Coyle. And that, again, this is another quote that's very valuable to me. But a good teacher is one who makes himself progressively unnecessary. And you know, I strongly believe that. And what I wanted to do, I don't know how much time I have left. So Mike, please let me know so I don't.
For me, you have all the time, because my evening is off. But if you really want to look at time in that term, I think we're around 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes left.
Okay, that's cool. So all I wanted to do here is just one of the other talks that I've given was basically on pick and roll, and um, I just wanted to share just some brief things in regards to that, and then I'll be done. But just um, basically just in regards to pick and roll, what I've kind of seen a lot, especially with NBA basketball and even here, is just if and as it is for any action, if you cannot put pressure on the rim and commit two people to the ball at it, or whether it be with your shooting or with your ability to get to the rim and get a paint touch, it's very, very difficult to be effective in pick and roll. And what I've seen a lot of is that you have a lot of players that are involved in pick and roll, for example, here in Europe, but they don't serve the function of putting pressure on the rim or committing. And in regards to the different types of pick and rolls, if I'm running side pick and roll or logo pick and roll, anything that basically is like below the 3-point line, usually those pick and rolls are very physical. I'm going to come off shoulder to shoulder with a lot of contact. Anything that's extended, like high pick and roll, angle pick and roll, spread pick and roll, step ups or Davidsons, as people call them, that's done with speed. It's not really about making any physical contact, and, if anybody wants, for me to share video and all that stuff, but I think that's like a misnomer in that regard. The entire function of a pick or any action is to commit two to the ball and to create mismatches and disorganization in the defense. Like that's the function. And so that's basically what I wanted to share in that regard in terms of starting this. Yeah, and I think this is something that's obvious here in Europe, is just because you run a pick and roll, it doesn't mean that the ball handler or the roll man has to get the ball or shoot. The most efficient thing you can get out of pick and roll is a spot up for somebody off the ball to catch and shoot. Like that's the most valuable thing in these situations.
Yeah, and I think one of the big differences out here versus the States as well is the amount of times the point guard really puts the pressure on the basket, on the rim, like you said. Because out here, okay, I'm going to do the same thing as you. I'm going to generalize everything. Most of the times we don't teach the snake.
No.
While in America, it's not common for bigs to roll, so snaking is everywhere.
Yeah.
And out here, bigs are rolling, and most of the times we play off the perimeter and then move on.
I would say if you're doing snakes properly, it's a delayed roll, right? So you can still hard roll, if you snake, but whoever the roll man is has to be patient and read what's going on, because if you do snake it, then the roll can still be there, or you're just attacking open space. But I think collectively, because the guards are putting so much pressure on the rim when they come off picks in America, or honestly, even if you watch EuroLeague, you watch Mike James, you look at Shane Larkin, there's a reason why you have that type of American guard here, right, in Europe, because they put crazy amounts of pressure on the rim, and it just takes one pick. They don't have to run several. You can run your offense or whatever, but if that guy gets the ball at the end of the shot clock and they play a pick or anywhere around 8 seconds, you pretty much know what the product is going to be. And, I was on another podcast recently and we were talking about this quite a bit. And, I think European offense, I think, is probably the most beautiful offense in the world, personally. Like, I love it. But I think collectively here, right, they get to work a lot faster. Sometimes it's just all this false offense that doesn't serve a function or a purpose. Or the picks are to create something else, right? Instead of the original objective, which is to create disorganization or to score. And you see that a lot more in NBA basketball. And I think a lot of times it's the value of, say, for example, the way it's played in America is degraded as though it's not as good, when in actuality, they're just getting right to business a lot earlier. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, I want to challenge you on that one, because, like you said, in the US, you want to get to business right away. While in Europe, we mostly say, okay, we're playing more like chess. Or we're looking for, but why shouldn't a pick and roll be to create a mismatch further down the shot clock? If you know that a particular defense is going to be played against you, and you get a particular type of defense on you, which will give you a better matchup 10 seconds later if one or two actions more provide you that. Instead of like, let me just be devil's advocate here, bullying your way down to the rim and see what's going to happen of that.
No, I love this. Like, this is good, you know? So it's like, actually, hopefully we get to spend some time, but like, so here in the office here, I have 4 TVs up, right? And I can look at, for example, like I'll have on one TV, and I won't bother to do it now. I could have European basketball, college basketball, NBA basketball, and let's say some other level, right? Both the European basketball and college basketball are virtually the same if you were to watch them. And the reason they're the same is because the coaches dictate everything in those leagues. The coaches are the ones that dictate everything. And so oftentimes what happens is you get all of this false action. There's nothing wrong with me running multiple actions, right? I think that's a wonderful thing. I think, you know, for example, and I won't even, you know, I can get to a lot of this other stuff, but like the most effective pick and roll is if you get a pin down pick, or you get a handoff pick, or you get a flare pick, or you get anything that's multiple. Anything that requires you to get multiple pick and rolls in possession is most dangerous. So this is not me saying there's no value in it, or the plays don't have value. Most of the best plays are that way. But if I have 5 to 6 actions to produce one result that I could get in 3 in a 24-second shot clock, and then at the end of that time, then I'm utilizing my collective brain power of my team, right? Like, honestly, look at EuroLeague, because they're even shifting, right? Because if I pull that up and I watch it, you see a lot more elements of that where the players are collectively doing this. And also randomization is what is the hardest thing to guard in basketball. So if I can scout whatever your set is going to be, and I know what's coming, and it's any kind of decent coach, they're going to blow it up, which you see a lot of that. Does that make, I mean, I don't, yeah.
We opened the box of Pandora, I think. My phone is going off, the chat is going off, everything is going off everywhere. So I got messages on my phone, I got messages in the chat out here. It's like everybody is saying their thing, and this makes it great. But I did want to add one thing towards it, because multiple picks, because I was thinking about it, and I actually wrote a little blog on it on our Elite Academy or Elite Athletes website. It was actually to frustrate the other guard or the other person guarding you, because if you have to continuously defend screens and get hit by screens, at one point that screen doesn't feel fine anymore. While if you're just getting hit by one screen and have to fight over, for example, it's not that much. But if you continuously have to fight over screens or get under or like bully yourself through screens, at one point you do feel that type of contact, and it gets into your mind as well. And I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. It's excellent. I mean, I would say, like, if you think about the Spurs, the San Antonio Spurs, when they were playing at their peak basketball, I think they were the best marriage between what we're talking about. Because if Tony Parker, for example, played a pick, he was getting right to work.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
You know, but at the same time, like, the rest of their offense was still devised around doing those things. I think there were 200 pick and rolls in a game. Like, they were punishing teams. They were beating up guards basically on all of those, every game, because they're trying to they're trying to ice stuff and do all these different things, and you're getting hit. And it is a cumulative effect. So, yes, So I definitely agree with that. What I would say, so, and I'll try to finish this stuff very quickly because I know we kind of got off track, but personally, people always talk about 3-level scores. I think they're 5-level scores. Obviously, rim. One of the ones I think that's most overlooked is floater range, 5 to 10 feet, which is exceptionally hard to develop. Mid range, which I think is, skill set wise, you don't see many guards in Europe that have all 5 of these as far as guards. And I hope to see more of that with the time that I'm spending here. And then, 3-point range, and then obviously gravity, being able to shoot 2 to 3 feet behind the 3-point line. And pick and roll defense, I think everybody understands that. And then just basically a pattern recognition piece. This is a quote by McCormick. And, again, I enjoy a solid fundamental base, but they adapt, expand, and explore to enhance their performance. And unstructured play, pickup games, small-sided games, etc., are the best environments for this exploration and adaptation. So, so very, very quickly, and this will probably be the last slide that I'll bring up, and then we can wrap up. Is so Raymond Felton, he's one of my trainees for the last 8 years until this last season, and so basically these are the things that I would spend time with him on, and so being able to reject picks, use them, snake them, fake snake them, hard show reads, which included splits, being able to get to the rim, floaters, attacking the hip, get into mid-range pull-ups, trays, which is pull-up threes, and gravity shots. And then some of the really, really advanced ones are all the pre-split stuff that you can do as well in these situations. But this encompasses pretty much everything.
Yeah. Good. Could you mind or would you mind elaborate a little bit more about the gravity stuff? Because I watched another clinic and in which you talked about gravity as well.
Oh, yeah.
And for people that might not be familiar with it, because I wasn't familiar with it before I watched the other clinic, so I know a little bit about it. But could you talk a little bit about what you think gravity is for you?
Yeah. Well, probably so over the summer. So one of my trainees played for the Dallas Mavericks last season. And so I got to spend time in the Mavericks facility, and on the floor, they had these big blue boxes that were taped all over the floor. About, I want to say 5, maybe not 5 of my steps beyond the 3-point line. They had one that was right at the top of the key, and then 2 that were like above 45 that were pretty far back. And their entire core guard group had to practice shooting from there, including, everybody, Porzingis, Luka, everybody was shooting from there. And it was a large part of what they were doing. And so gravity, and honestly, it really started with, or let me say it became popular with Dan Antonio and the Rockets. But if you notice, Eric Gordon and Ryan, what's Ryan's last name? Anyway, but several of their top level shooters, they had to be able to shoot from gravity, which is, some people call it the 4-point line, but it's much, much deeper than the regular 3-point line because of how far those defenders have to cover space if you can comfortably shoot from there. And so the gravity that's created, for example, by a guy like Steph Curry, because he can shoot from so deep, creates all kinds of issues in terms of rotations for a defense and how much ground they have to cover.
Yeah, I think that's a great one on the gravity as well, because now it looks more familiar and sounds more familiar.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like now, like every team has 1 or 2 guys that is the expectation and job, but it creates so much pressure in terms of the amount of coverage you have to have. And then honestly, this is something somebody shared this with me, but Chris Mullin, when he was involved with the Golden State Warriors, would always say that pretty much, I would say 90% of the defenses that are created, you guard the 3-point line right at the 3-point line. So if you have a shooter who's comfortable shooting 2 or 3 steps beyond it, you'll get that consistently until they have to come all the way out. And when they do, I mean, it's open season. You have to go over top on picks, even if they're deep. I mean, that's how you have all of these guys going for 50 now. Because they come off the pick, you have to go over top, and you already have an advantage. Then it's 4-on-3, and you're shooting fish in a barrel. It literally is just pop, pop, pop.
Yeah, or just do a spin move, go into a reject, and just shoot a shot like Dame did.
Exactly.
That's
Actually,
not
I was
skill you learn.
watching today. It's so funny you bring that up.
That's not skill you learn every day.
No, no, exactly, exactly, and yeah, and I'll just wrap up. But this is my information. So if you all want to reach out to me on any of these, media platforms or anything, I'm more than happy to engage and talk with you all. And yeah, this is a lot of fun. So thank you for involving me with this, and I would love to get to know all of you a lot better.
No, thank you, and also thank you, Francesco, for being on here and for sharing information. Um, as normal, I will stop the recording in a second, and for the guys that want to stay on and just discuss some more things, feel free to stay. For guys that want to hop off, um, feel free to hop off. And thank you all for watching this and being part of this as well.